And I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your Sunday schedule to come and be with us today and be a part of launching the dream. In the 5 years that my colleagues and I at Millersville have been working on this, we have become true believers that young people are interested in learning about breast cancer and that the message can be taken to heart and may indeed save their life someday. So thank you for helping us fund the idea of taking this not just at Millersville, but taking it across the country. What I'm going to do this afternoon is reminisce a bit with you. You will be spared the entire hour and 15-minute Hooray for Heroes talk. Oh, you want it? Is that what you I have had the thrill of being on the road for 20 years, over 20 years, talking to teachers and parents about real heroes and the importance of real heroes in the lives of their children, but also in their own lives. We all need heroes. My travel schedule has, thank goodness, slowed down, but I've spoken to probably over 75,000 people in 44 states, over 600 presentations from groups as small as a dozen to groups as large as 2,500. So what I'm going to do is share some of that with, wow, is right. I'm going to share some of that with you today. By the way, it started out a little rocky. My very first big national presentation was in Fort Myers, Florida, to a conference called the Core Knowledge Conference. I was pretty nervous, this big gig. Everything that could go wrong went wrong getting there. And I was actually having the opportunity that day to meet the founder, Dr. E.D. Hirsch, so I was quite nervous about that. The plane was late, the van to pick me up was late, so I grabbed my suitcase at the airport, get to the hotel 10 minutes before I am to meet Dr. Hirsch, nervous, excited, but I figure I've got to grab a quick shower and put on some fresh clothing, and I opened my suitcase. I had grabbed the wrong suitcase at the airport. So I am now looking at some other gentlemen's clothing, wondering if they fit. And then it dawned on me, if he has by now opened my suitcase, what he has seen is a whole array of women's hats and an Indian headdress. My guess is he thought the village people were in town. When the concierge called the airline, by the way, he had already called in. So I met Dr. Hirsch in my flight clothes. The trip and at this conference went very well, by the way. In fact, it was the first of 22 times I was able to address the Core Knowledge National Conference. I tell people, jokingly, I had groupies at Core Knowledge. And Kevin can testify to that with the reception sometimes I would get. So the trip, I'm so exhilarated. And I get into Harrisburg at about 9 o'clock at night, get my car. The place I parked took it through a free car wash, so I'm on 283 and I am thrilled because I had also been lined up by 12 schools already just at the conference to speak. And I'm about 10 minutes from the airport thinking, how am I going to tell my classes tomorrow at Millersville how exciting this was and what I learned? And I hear a voice. Mr. Deninberg, can you hear me? I am alone in the car. It is a full moon, and I'm now like, you just, what's going on? And I keep driving, though, and now again I hear, Mr. Deninberg, can you hear me? All right, now I'm losing it. I pull over. I look through the moonroof, the sunroof, because I'm thinking, they're here for me. I always thought, what would that be like to be abducted? And then I thought, do I tell them it's Dr. Deninberg? Or will that be more probes? I don't know. So I hear it one more time because I now start driving again. Mr. Deninberg, can you hear me? Oh, freaked out. Get home. I lived at that point in Mannheim. Pull in the driveway. It had stopped. By the way, I had turned the radio off because I thought it was coming through the radio. I park. I reach over for something on the passenger side. Here, the gentleman who ran my car through the car wash had left his walkie-talkie. Did he ever say, Mr. Deninberg, you have my walkie-talkie? I go in the house, I call the parking lot, and I said, are you missing a walkie-talkie? The gentleman says, you must be Mr. Deninberg. Could you bring it back tonight? I said, you're going to be lucky if you ever see this walkie-talkie again. Fortunately, 20 years of road trips did not end like that. So let's reminisce a bit, and we're going to put a few costumes on. I have a lot of the props out in the reception area, by the way, and the prop suitcase weighed about 48 pounds. It was always inspected by TSA. I should have kept a stack of those inspection tags. I've noticed that when I first started going on the road in early 90s till last year, that suitcase got progressively heavier. I don't know what that's telling me. This is the first slide that audiences would see because it gave me an opportunity to talk about truly one of my most beloved unsung heroes. I'm very lucky in life. I have a number of unsung heroes. My mom and dad, and some of you in the audience knew Hilda and David Deninberg, were truly as close to perfect parents as you could get. Speech teachers. Friends, I had a very severe speech impediment till the age of 5, and blessed teachers gave me this gift. And I never got to thank them in person. So thank you, whoever you were. And of course, Diana. Diana taught me the real meaning of what it means to persevere, to live a full life, even while carrying such a burden. Never asked why me. I have trouble remembering my sister ever complaining about breast cancer. 1989, the first occurrence, and Diana fought it and won. 1995, the second occurrence, the other breast, Diana fought it and Diana won. 1998, moved to her bones, her scapula. Diana fought it and she won. 2001, it moved to her liver, the hardest fight yet, 2 years of chemo every week, and Diana won. And the doctor said to her loving husband, Mr. Duran said to the doctors, my wife must be your star patient. And the doctors looked at Mr. Duran and said, oh no, Donald, your wife is our 5-star patient. And then in 2006, the cancer moved to her brain, and never again, why asking me, why? But the next battle. And Diana fought it valiantly. And on October 21st of 2007, Diana passed on, but Diana's spirit is here. And that spirit is inspiring so many other people to fight. Liz Fulmer's song captured Diana's spirit to a T. So thank you for coming here. And the audiences all around the country, when they would see me at a break or whatever, the first thing they would say to me is, thank you for sharing about Diana. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Jefferson, as many of you know, is one of my real heroes. I wear a Jefferson shirt in his honor. I had the thrill of going to William & Mary because I told my high school counselor I want to go where Mr. Jefferson went to school. And I was able to get in. And you know, it's sad though, because even with these wonderful historical sites we have in America, we're losing the heroes. People don't want to learn as much about them. And young people particularly. These are some of the ads Colonial Williamsburg ran a few years ago. Would you visit if we put big round ears on it? Our superheroes wear capes too. And my all-time favorite Colonial Williamsburg print ad, there's the child playing with his toys. Maybe he'd ask to visit if his kid's meal came with a Thomas Jefferson action figure. We don't see heroes very much. How many people remember Kermit the Frog's creator, Mr. Henson? We throw our heroes away. So what is a hero? A hero is somebody who makes a positive difference in the world. Your life is better because that hero walked with us. Here's a wonderful definition, because we get confused today. What's a hero? What's a celebrity? I would like you to read this with me, please. Ready? The hero is known for achievements.
The celebrity for well-knownness. The hero reveals the possibilities of human nature. The celebrity reveals the possibilities of the press and the media. Celebrities are people who make news. The heroes are people who make history. Time makes heroes. That dissolves celebrities.
Isn't that brilliant? Isn't that brilliant? Dr. Daniel Borstein, noted historian and librarian of Congress. So what is the difference? It's ultimately a personal decision, isn't it? Oprah Winfrey, hero or more a celebrity? But what a debate we should be having in America about heroes, because without that debate, without that interest, we just toss them aside. You know, in an audience, a group this large, 25 of you would have been wheeled in here, and another 25 of you wouldn't even be with us today. But because a hero worked tirelessly in a laboratory in the early 1950s, we in this auditorium today walk, and we don't even remember him. All together, please. Dr. Jonas, thank you, thank you. Don't we owe these heroes at least remembering them as a way of thanking them? Thank you, Dr. Salk. Thank you so much. There's an interesting hero, Will Rogers. The man from Oklahoma, hero or celebrity? I think in my book he's a hero. You know, folks, he made America laugh during the Depression. That wasn't easy. We were depressed. Oklahoma's favorite son. I have had the thrill of speaking in Oklahoma City 6 different times, including 5 days after 9/11. I was in the air. Second day planes were flying. People always ask me, were you scared? No, the 2 other people and I on the plane felt perfectly safe. But they wouldn't let the 3 of us move to first class. That is a true story. I think we were balancing the jet or so, I don't know. So, and Oklahoma City was feeling very emotional after 9/11 because of their own terrorist attack at the federal building. Leaving the next day, I had one of those remarkable stories that reinforced everything I believed in about heroes. The airport is named the Will Rogers International Airport, and at that point, and sadly the airport has pulled back on this, Will was everywhere in the airport. Beautiful showcase of Will Rogers memorabilia, life-size cutouts of the hero saying, ticket counter, bathrooms. Was his airport. He directed you around his airport. It was fabulous. And then one of the most teachable moments I have ever had the personal privilege to observe. A little boy, probably about 6 years old, they're near one of the showcases, and the little boy tugs on Daddy's sleeve. Daddy, who is this? He's everywhere. Daddy knew. And for the next 3 minutes, I was enthralled as Daddy explained to his son who this hero was. Sonny's one of us, a native Oklahoman, and also part Native American. And people loved him. He made people laugh at a very hard time. And then Sonny was a cowboy, and Daddy's doing this, and the kid's eyes are getting bigger and bigger. He was meeting a hero. And at the end of his 3 minutes, by the way, I kept getting closer and closer. I had to, given anything to have a video of this moment. And at the end, he says to his son, son, I want to teach you Will Rogers' most famous words. And please, friends, if you know them, say them with me. Will Rogers' most famous quote, I never met a man I didn't like. All together, please. I never met a man I didn't like. What a beautiful motto as your lifetime motto. And the son was wide-eyed. He had met a hero. I looked right at Daddy and I went, to this day, I wonder what that man thought. But I can tell you, if we could find that boy today, and he'd be probably 20, 21, and I could ask him, tell me about Will Rogers, and he'd tell me what his daddy taught him that day. Because learning about heroes grabs you, it motivates you, makes you want to be a better person yourself. Oh my goodness, my favorite traveling companion. I was going to leave her in the lobby, but she was just furious that she wouldn't get a chance to meet you personally. Goodwill, thank you. 25 cents, thank you. Oh yes, I traveled all over the country with this gentleman. Yes, I am indeed. Who? Oh, Eleanor Roosevelt. Please say it just like that. Eleanor Roosevelt. Boy, for some of you, that was out of your comfort zone, wasn't it? I loved when there were high school male teachers in the audience, because I'd have them do it alone. But what a hero. What a hero. She redefined the whole position of First Lady. But more than that, she was such a generous and kind person at a time in our national history when we needed that exemplified. So Eleanor and I traveled across this country. As a speaker, you learn you need a way to hook an audience. Let me tell you, a puppet that cost me $1 to make, Eleanor did her job. There's only one time she and I had a difficult experience, and it was actually in front of almost an audience of 2,000, and her head fell off. So I picked her head up and I put it back on and I said, Eleanor, what happened? She goes, there's too many damn Republicans here. Thank you. They didn't laugh as much, actually. Please take time, if you haven't, then to see the vest in the lobby. One of my college students had made that vest for the Heroes Fair and then gifted it to me. It was just beautiful. Here is the most photographed prop I carried on the road for 20-some years. This is nothing more than a quilt about a hero made out of Ziploc freezer bags. And I think I could probably go all across this country and find freezer bag quilts in a lot of classrooms. Because one of the things I tried to teach both teachers and parents, bring heroes to life in a fun way and tell their story. History is a story. It's just this names and dates and facts. What an interesting hero or a celebrity. Annie Oakley was famous, of course, for sharpshooting. Does that qualify her as a hero? No. But what did Annie do that did make her a hero, in my opinion? She gave back. She gave back. She spent her golden years traveling this country, teaching gun safety to women and children. And when America entered World War I, Annie Oakley became the Bob Hope of her day. She went overseas to entertain the American troops. By the way, Miss Oakley, it is said, was the most famous and recognizable woman on the planet, next only to Queen Victoria. How about that? My favorite side story of Annie Oakley, the Wild West show, unbelievably popular, and the superstar was Annie. She would end her act by asking a volunteer to come forward to hold a cigarette in your mouth. And she would then proceed to shoot the cigarette from your mouth. Like I would do that? Cigarettes are dangerous. She's in the United Germany has been united under the Kaiser Wilhelm I. She's performing in the Berlin area. Out of the royal box jumps the crown prince, who eventually will become Wilhelm II. Miss Oakley, I am your volunteer. Annie looks at her famous husband, Frank Butler, and says, no way. Headline, Annie kills future emperor. He would not back down. Miss Oakley, you must take the shot. Can you imagine the tension? I thought I was tense this morning. I can't. And so there's the crown prince. Perfect, perfect. 25 years later, he's the bad guy. He's Kaiser Wilhelm II. Annie sends him a telegram. May I have a second shot? See how much fun heroes can be when you tell their stories, when you get into who they really are. Probably the most duplicated prop, though, that I carried, put your hero on a cereal box. What a project from primary grades up through high school. There's a whole group of teachers in one county in North Carolina. Their graduating seniors must do a cereal box of the hero from American history that they most admire. So you bring your learning to life through visuals. And of course, today with computers, so much easier. So you're looking at Leonardo's, that was a second grade project, and Nelson Mandela Freedom Flakes. Probably my trademark in my 20-plus years of speaking were my hats. Because hats portray, by putting on a hat, you can become somebody else. So I would normally travel with about 20 hats, and they would be an integral part of the presentation. I'm just going to do one hat for you. And when I finish, if you will just shout out this hero's name. He is one of 8 honorary American citizens, the highest honor our country can bestow by act of Congress and the signature of the president upon a foreign person that we think exemplifies heroism. We shall fight them on the beaches. We shall fight them in the streets. We shall fight them in our homes. We shall never surrender. And when the history of the British people is written, it shall be said, this was their finest hour. Never, never, never give up. All together. Sir Winston Churchill, who by the charisma of his character and the strength of his voice kept democracy alive. And so few young people know who he is. Thank you, Sir Winston. I carried with me our hometown hero, Milton S. Hershey, because I want Americans all across this country to know what a special individual he was. Not only a master entrepreneur, and by the way, you know, he made it big first here in Lancaster. He lived on Vine Street. So I present Mr. Hershey through a fanny pack, and that's sitting out in the lobby. And we talk about, what was his first candy? Not chocolate. Caramels, which the company is now making. And he sold them on the streets of Lancaster in a push cart. Penny a caramel. You're not going to get wealthy selling penny candy, are you? But an English candy maker was visiting Lancaster, tasted them, loved them so much, paid Mr. Hershey a small fortune for the formula. So Mr. Hershey became rich Mr. Hershey. The Bible, he never forgot his Mennonite roots. He read the Bible every day. The cow represents the dairy farms where his orphan boys lived. Mr. and Mrs. Hershey couldn't have children, but they brought in boys and provided them with a home and schooling and a vocation. And of course, as all of you local know, one of the greatest institutions still in America, the Hershey Homes. About 1,700 young kids, ages, I think, from kindergarten through high school, get a second chance in life thanks to Milton Hershey. Taught him a vocation. But what I most emphasize to the people in my audience is Mr. Hershey, the philanthropist, because we all know him as the candy maker. How much did this man care about people, not just his boys? He cared about all his workers. When the Depression hit, when the market crashed, his chocolate factory foreman came to him and said, Mr. Hershey, we must immediately lay off 600 workers or we'll go under. Mr. Hershey looked at his foreman and said, we are not laying off a single employee. I don't care if it wipes out my personal fortune, my men will keep working. Visit Hershey, the Hershey Hotel, the Hershey Community Center, all built by Mr. Hershey's unemployed workers, the Hershey High School. Every man was given a job to keep the dignity of work. Mr. Hershey showed up at a construction site. There was a backhoe. Mr. Hershey said, what is this doing here? The foreman, the job site supervisor said, this replaces 6 men. This can do the work of 6 men. Mr. Hershey said, I want the backhoe off the property by the end of the day. Heroes teach us lessons. Now, kudos to those in America wealthy today who are stepping to the plate to give part of their fortune away. Step up to the plate even further and do what Milton Hershey did. He gave 100% of his fortune away. That's the true meaning of philanthropy, isn't it? Thank you, Mr. Hershey, and we in Lancaster love you. Thank you. By the way, you know the Hersheys were booked on the Titanic. That fanny pack usually includes a ticket aboard the Titanic. Mrs. Hershey didn't feel well. Best headache she ever had. One of my favorite heroes in the book, Mary McLeod Bethune, and she will stay in the new book coming out next year with proceeds going to Diana's Dreamers. We must eliminate 10. Mary McLeod Bethune will stay in because of the passion of one of my college students. As the book was developing in 1999, I would put the list of 50 in my college classroom, and this lady wasn't on the list, and one of my college students who had studied her was indignant. Dr. Deninberg, where's Mary McLeod Bethune? She's not on your list. No, Angie, she didn't make the varsity. Ooh, wrong thing to say. For the next 2 weeks after that put off, note cards under my office door, reason number 6, reason number 8, reason number 12. She got up to 20 reasons on note cards why this woman, Mary McLeod Bethune, must bump somebody off the list and be in the book for kids. How's that for passion? But it didn't end there. I'm driving to my 8 o'clock class. I'm at about 7 in the morning, and I'm at a red traffic light, and I look in my rearview mirror. A banner unfurls in the car behind me. Mary McLeod Bethune must be in your book. Angie didn't miss a beat, did she? We got out of the cars. I said, oh, Angie, she said, I saw you back there. I was bringing it to class, but this is much better. On $1.50 in her pocket, she started a school for 6 little African-American girls. And that school today is Bethune-Cookman College. And you visit the campus in Florida, and you enter the main building, and it says, enter to learn. And as you depart, it says, exit to serve. That's a hero. That's a hero. Heroes excited my students, and I hope they excite you. Oh, my goodness, my favorite modern president. And I had the thrill of role-playing Harry S. Truman. So let's bring the president to the stage for just a few minutes. Courage is when you even role-play Harry Truman at the Truman Library in Independence, Missouri. You may not have liked Harry Truman's decisions, but you could always count on the president to make a decision. The buck stopped with him. Well, it is a pleasure to be here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and just spend a few minutes with you. I got everything done on the boss's to-do list, which is why I was able to visit you today. Yeah, the boss, Mrs. Truman. Mrs. Truman. I first fell in love with Mrs. Truman. We were in elementary school together, and I just knew that little girl had a special twinkle in her eye, and I started wooing her in high school. However, I had one major obstacle in that courtship path. That would be Bess's mother, Mrs. Wallace. Mrs. Wallace really, truly never cared for Harry S. Truman. In fact, even when I reached this high office, Mrs. Wallace once said to her daughter, "You know, Bess, you could have married better." Bess is a very private person, of course, but now thrust in the limelight of the presidency after Mr. Roosevelt's passing, Bess has had to deal a lot with the press and so on. She does get a chance to escape every so often to Independence, Missouri. But I remember the one time a press reporter approached Mrs. Truman and said, "Mrs. Truman, aren't you embarrassed by some of the language that your husband uses in his public discourse?" Mrs. Truman, being the very intelligent individual she is, smartly looked at the reporter and said, well, can you give me an example? And the reporter says, "Well, Mrs. Truman, he uses the word manure so often." Mrs. Truman laughed, looked at the reporter, says, "Took me 10 years to get him to say manure." You know, folks, when I read what historians have written about me, I'm thrilled that they have pointed to the achievements under my administration and the courage to make decisions. But what I'm really most pleased with is a simple story they usually tell. It involves a 3-cent stamp. Now, how could a 3-cent stamp have anything to do with the President of the United States? As you know, the President has free mailing privileges for government business. If I can't be with Mrs. Truman, I do something at the end of the day. If she's at home in Independence or if I'm traveling, I do something at the end of every day, and that is I sit down and write a personal letter to my wife. You know, folks, family comes first. Never forget that. As busy as we are, family comes first. And then I seal that letter to Mrs. Truman, and I pull out of my desk or out of my coat pocket a 3-cent stamp, and I put that on the letter to Mrs. Truman, because that is a personal letter from Harry S. Truman to his wife, and Harry S. Truman will pay for it, not the government. Integrity is when no one is watching. Thank you, Mr. President. Oh, I'm going to take an extra minute, Harvey, because I have an extra minute here. The president visited my college classes at the end of every semester as well, and truly some touching stories from my students. The one I'll share with you. Harry would start the class, he'd go through, shake hands, and one young man, I'm going to say 21, 22, grabbed the president's hand. "Mr. President, this is an honor to meet you." And a tear was rolling down his cheek. It's the only time I came real close to breaking character. What a moving moment. So we get through the class, and of course at the end of the class I said, "Robert, may I talk to you for a minute?" And I said, I was very touched. "If you don't mind, would you share the story behind the tear?" He said, "I'd be happy to, Dr. Deninberg. I've been waiting all semester to meet the president. My grandfather served in World War II, and he was in the Pacific Theater, and he was about to be sent on the invasion of Japan, had that been necessary. It was avoided by the president's decision to drop the atomic weapons. And my grandfather thought that President Truman personally saved his life. And so after he was discharged, he dressed in his Navy finest and went down to Washington to meet the president and thank him personally. And if you know anything about Harry Truman, he used to take walks every day. And if you were at the right place at the right time, you could talk, wave, and say hello to the president. And there's Granddaddy in his uniform. "Mr. President, Mr. President." And the president came over. And my grandfather got a chance in person to thank the President of the United States. And Dr. Deninberg, at every family reunion, we gather around Granddaddy so he can tell the story of the day he met his hero. And hence the tear. What a beautiful story. What a beautiful story. Thank you. Thank you. My favorite story as a speaker happened, I've had wonderful opportunities to be with people, including today. School district in North Carolina, the superintendent had heard me speak and decided to bring me there to talk to every person in the district, not just the faculty. The school board was there, the bus drivers were there, the cafeteria, because she realized that my message about helping young people discover heroes doesn't just happen in the classroom. It happens whenever we interact with young people. So I had an hour and a half with the audience, and it was magical. It was just magical. And people lined up to talk to me afterwards. The one that left the impression, and I regret so much I've lost the email, so I don't know this gentleman's name to share. He was about early 70s, African American. He said, Dr. Deninberg, it was an honor to be in your audience today. Folks, as a speaker, doesn't get any better than that. I really was upset that we were required to be here. Didn't you love honesty? He said, I didn't understand it. I said, why did I have to come to this? And he said, oh, I'm so thankful. The superintendent said this is required, and I'm going to go thank her after I speak to you. He goes, I never thought about it, the impact that I could have on a young person's life by talking about a hero. I have an idea, Dr. Deninberg, and if it works, I'm going to mail it to you. And I said, mail it to me if it doesn't work. 2 weeks later, I get one of the most moving emails I've ever received. Dr. Deninberg, today I tried my idea. I put a picture of my hero at the front of my bus. And some students noticed it as they came on. Most went to their seat and started chatting and so on. But at the end of the run, I pull into the high school, and as they started to get up, I said, please, just I want a minute to tell you about my hero, Joe Louis. Joe Louis. And for the next minute and a half, I talked to them about why Joe Louis helped me be a better person and made me understand that color doesn't matter. And Dr. Deninberg, they stood and cheered. Was my one-word email to him. Look at the impact. In less than 2 minutes, we will never know the impact that bus driver had on those students, but they cared enough to stand and cheer. This is a flag of a hero that we've lost. It's a flag that represents the great Dr. Albert Schweitzer, who dedicated his life through a Christian medical mission in Africa, brought modern medicine to a continent that didn't know anything about it, and for which the world recognized him with the Nobel Peace Prize. It's one of my favorite stories to tell how an adult can have an impact on a child. In Holland, there was a young lad named Harold. He was 8 years old when his teacher in Holland decided to read the story about Dr. Schweitzer, who was still very much alive. This is over 75 years ago. And it was a serialization being sent home by a reporter who was following the young medical missionary. And little Harold got hooked. He couldn't wait for next week's story. And at the end of the 6 weeks, he said to his teacher, Mrs. Bartling, I'm going to write to the good doctor. And she encouraged him. And guess what, folks? Who wrote back? Little 8-year-old Harold got a letter from his hero, Dr. Schweitzer. The correspondence continued. Little Harold started a pen-pal relationship with Dr. Schweitzer, and if the doctor himself couldn't respond, somebody from the medical mission always did. 2 years after that first letter, Dr. Schweitzer, now world famous, went on a tour of European countries to raise money, came to Holland. Who did he want to meet? Well, I want to meet my pen pal, now 10-year-old little Harold. 10-year-old little Harold stood face to face with his hero. 10-year-old little Harold went on to become Dr. Harold Robles, founder and chief executive officer until his retirement of the Albert Schweitzer Institute for the Humanities, which today has medical missions in over 120 countries. All because a caring adult, a teacher, introduced a hero to her class. Look at the lives that have been affected and saved and enriched through little 8-year-old Harold learning about a hero. That's the magic of heroes. And my favorite story to tell about my hero, in addition to my sister, is one of my teachers. And I see some classmates here, and they had this gentleman as well. You know, I tell people, and it's the message I'm going to give you right now, honor your unsung heroes. Remember the famous ones and talk about a Dr. Salk and so on. But in your own life, you have a hero. You have several, I'm sure, like I do. Did you ever say to them, did you ever know you're my hero? Did you ever know the impact you had on my life? Maybe it's a minister, maybe it's a scout leader. Who knows? But a teacher. So I'm in front of an audience in 2001, and I'm talking about unsung heroes, and a light bulb goes off. You know, folks, I don't think I ever thanked my hero, my teacher, my favorite history teacher who's a hero. I promise that as soon as I retire in 2002, I am going to see if this teacher is still with us and thank him. Every word of this is a true story. Okay? So I'm set to retire June of 2002. The day before the last day of my teaching, I get home from teaching, and there is a message on my phone machine from that teacher. That teacher's name was Mr. Hildebrand, my 8th grade American history teacher. Hello, Dennis, this is Mr. Hildebrand. You need to know I had not started my search. This is a true do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. This is like back at the car from the car wash. This is... Hello, Dennis. This is Mr. Hildebrand. I wonder if you remember who I am. I've been reading about you and your work with heroes, and I was wondering if I could ask a favor. Would you be so kind as to speak to my local Lions Club group about what you do? Folks, I did not pick up the phone and call him back immediately because I was fighting tears, and I know I would have said, "Oh, Mr. Hildebrand, I'm so happy you're alive." So I waited until the very next day before my last class, 10 minutes before I was going to teach the last formal class of my educational career. Hello, Mr. Hildebrand. Do I remember who you are? Sir, you changed my life. Mr. Hildebrand, it would be my distinct honor to speak at your Lions Club group. But sir, I want to warn you now, part of the evening will be spent talking about you. Fast forward to September 10th, 2002, in a very small fire hall in Mountville, Pennsylvania, I reunited with my 85-year young American history teacher in 8th grade, Mr. Hildebrand. He looked the same as when I had him in 8th grade. Big hug, how are you? How's your family? And then the very next question Mr. Hildebrand asked me is, so what history books have you been reading, Dennis? Yeah, wonderful. I had about 15, 20 minutes with the audience, with his Lions Club peers, and I wore a hat or two, and then I said, ladies and gentlemen, I have a rare honor tonight. I tell everybody across this great country, honor your unsung heroes, and tonight, in front of his peers, I get to honor one of mine. And I talked about what a good teacher he was. He brought history to life. He was a great storyteller, quiet man, but a great storyteller. Then I said, Mr. Hildebrand, we have some unfinished business here tonight. At the end of 8th grade, you honored me with the 8th grade American History Award. You called me up on stage at the Junior High Awards Assembly. I got a $5 bill. Oh my God, I thought I was the richest kid in Mannheim. I kept that $5 bill till graduate school when I needed food. But Mr. Hildebrand, you are such a caring individual, you didn't think that was enough for your best student that year, and out of your own pocket, you gave me these 2 books, history books about the Civil War, and Mr. Hildebrand, I have treasured them. And upon seeing the books, 45 years after, Mr. Hildebrand teared up, which did not help me, the speaker. And when we got our composure back, I said, Mr. Hildebrand, before I give you a copy of my book tonight, you never signed these 40 years ago. Would you do me the honor? And Mr. Hildebrand signed these treasured books. Folks, honor your unsung heroes. Mr. Hildebrand and I became friends. He visited my gardens, as you are welcome to visit, brought his lovely wife over. And then I got to be on CNN Live to talk about heroes, and I made one request to Roberta Whitfield. Could I end the evening, the presentation on CNN Live, with a picture of my favorite teacher and tell the story? So folks, my history teacher saw himself on national TV. Isn't that wonderful? And shortly, thank you.